Good morning. And for those of you in Europe, good afternoon and welcome. Woo. Chatting about Italy. No. Oh. Yes, 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 yes. I have seen that. Yes. Which, by the way, I actually felt like Alfa Romeo did a really good job with their livery. I really loved their special livery for Italy. I thought it was really cool. That was really cool.
Let's start over.
Okay.
Welcome to Gravel Trap F1 Live, now with audio.
Amazing.
Uh,
Welcome, everyone.
I'm
Glad
sorry,
you can finally hear us.
I had to turn it off because of so you can't hear us talking before it's so
It
stupid.
makes sense.
Yeah. So good morning. You'll notice that Christina is missing today, and I'll be filling in, riding shotgun with Caroline here as Christina comes back from the Portland race. Um, what were you were talking about liveries?
Yes,
Sorry.
we were talking about liveries and how I felt like Alfa Romeo did a really good job with their livery, just really honoring Italy.
hmm
And
And
I don't know, it
I
was
was
great.
saying that Ferrari, obviously with their McDonald's themed livery, was
Well, it hurts that those are the colors that they're working with. Those are the colors that they're
absolutely,
working with.
absolutely not a problem. I mean, I thought it was funny, but I'm not going to sit there and yeah, I don't know. It. What was interesting was someone did point out that if you look at the back of the car, it looks like the German flag.
No way.
Yeah, because there's
Well,
uh I'll see if I can find a picture of it and put it up on screen. But it is Ferrari Monza livery.
maybe they were just honoring Schumacher and Vettel.
You know what? That's probably not that far off. It wasn't. It didn't look like there wasn't an actual flag. What it looked like was there was just happened to be this color scheme where these little stripes in the back together all looked like
Yeah,
that.
that's so funny.
Um, that's the wrong year. It keeps showing me the 75 anniversary. Was what, last year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll find it and put it up later.
Yeah, but Monza, what a race. It was exciting to see the Ferraris in the front in Monza. I think that we all were hoping for it, but with some of the performance this season, we weren't sure we were going to see it. So it was really nice. I felt like I said it the whole race. I said, if Carlos doesn't win driver of the day, it's rigged. I swear.
Did he?
He did, he
Okay,
did.
okay.
But I said it the whole time before they announced it. I was like, if he doesn't win driver of the day, I'm calling in the troops because the man has been working harder than anybody else on the grid all day. And hot take, but at the end, when Charles started to battle Carlos for the position, I was like, homeboy has been fighting everyone this whole race, and you've just been hanging out. And he finally gets a moment, and you charge.
That's that's not. I mean, that's a hot take, sure, but at the
It
same time, he
is.
was kind of just hanging on the whole
I
time.
know. I
Uh,
know.
but it would have been rude for him to try and push and to try and
Right. Oh,
disrupt
yeah, he's not a
things.
racing driver. He's not a racing driver if he didn't, but I was like, of all the times you could have decided to get in there, it wasn't when Checo was in front of you. It was when your teammate was in front of you.
By the way, Max Hiller is in the chat, so he has shown up today.
Hey,
We're
Max.
we're not alone here at 7 and 9
Amazing.
a.m.
Amazing.
Ferrari needed to be more assertive there and call off the fight. I
I think they
believe.
did.
I thought Fred. I don't want to mess up his pronunciation of his last name.
Mhm.
Vasseur. I thought he let them off the chain and just said, "Go for it, boys. Give the Tefosi a show."
He said he was quoted at the end of the race saying, "I always like to give them an opportunity to race because that's what they are. They're racing drivers." They did make the call. I think it was like 2 laps to the end when they were like, "Just bring them both home. Like, just, like, cool it, bring them both home." And then Charles did his charge, and everyone was like, "They just told you to just bring it home."
But we want to rile up the fans. I,
Well, I was really, really glad that Carlos was able to finish P3. I genuinely would have been so sad for him if it had ended up going to Charles. Not that like I like Charles and I think he's a great driver and he is, the son of Italy and whatever. But like he's had his moment at Monza.
mhm.
And everybody always is talking about how he's so much better than Carlos, and he's so much better than Carlos. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, I need Carlos has been out driving him all season. Carlos started on pole. I needed Carlos to have a moment in Monza and to show the people that like he's really, really good because he is. He's really, really good. It's not like Max and Checo where there's this huge disparity that you see in the points. They're really close in the points, and
Mhm.
Carlos is ahead of him in the points, and would
Yeah.
be significantly further ahead of him if he hadn't had a couple of unfortunate DNFs that were not his fault. So,
I absolutely agree. I think there, at least for me, there was this perception that Carlos was a in a Checo kind of role,
hmm
and then I just started noticing, like, well, he's actually no, he's doing really well. Why? And yeah, he's actually on par. Okay, maybe Charles isn't the wonder kid that uh, everyone was expecting or thinking. Like,
that's a hot take.
I said maybe he isn't. I'm just saying, like, if they're both given the same car and but I also think it's a good thing for your teammates to be well matched, whether or not they're at the max pace or the Checo pace. If they're well matched, it gives you uh it gives you more options
hmm
in various situations. Like if you're down and you need to have some kind of recovery and you have this gulf between your two drivers, you got less options. So
hmm
I'm all for that. My first thought as the race kicked off and a few laps in, watching the race, um, Max wasn't in the front, which means all we saw was the front of the pack.
Yeah.
We've been spoiled all year because when Max is leading, they show us the rest of the race.
Right,
And
right.
when Max isn't leading, we don't get to see the rest. We missed out on a lot of racing for the first 15 laps because they were just focused on Max
Yes.
and Carlos, which is would I think was what would normally happen. But for all season, we've been getting a whole different kind of broadcast, and it was kind of weird.
It was weird, and also, Esteban Ocon retired, and I feel like I, like, noticed it, like, 5 laps later, and I was like, "Wait a minute. When did Esteban Ocon what happened?" Like, he was there, and then he suddenly what I was like, "When did he DNF?" I missed that like, they didn't even cover it. Like, they didn't even show you. He was just, like, driving, and then suddenly he was with Sonoda at the bottom, and I was like, "What
I
happened?"
I wasn't aware.
Right? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
I feel
Like,
bad. I wasn't aware.
no, it was crazy because, like, we all saw Sonoda,
Yeah.
the Sonoda one because it was in the formation lap and it was like it was big. And then I feel like it was somewhere in like the 30s, lap 30s
Mm-hmm.
that I think because again, we saw nothing. And it was just like he was on the board and driving his little car.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, lap 42 comes around and I look and I'm like, "Wait a second. When did Ocon DNF? We completely missed that."
Steering issue forced his DNF.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I
Uh,
would not have known.
I mean, to be fair, if anything happened with the Alpine, I probably wouldn't have noticed. Um, it was a little gut wrenching because they say the curse obviously has been broken this year now that Max has won. Um, but Gasly, he was on the podium not that long ago, and
Mhm.
now I remember seeing him in the high teens, noticing his name. Like it's interesting to see from race to race some of these people that uh
Really bounce.
yeah really
Yeah.
bounce.
Alpine, I feel like consistently has been that way, at
Yes.
least since, I've been watching, that they'll just have moments where they're just destroying it. And then they'll have moments where they'll double DNF 2 races in a row, and you're like, "What is happening at Alpine?" But I will say, I felt like the racing was really good. I felt like the race went very quickly, um, because you didn't have a lot of DNFs, but you mentioned or you didn't have any crashes, like, we didn't
Hmm.
have any, like, safety cars. You mentioned the Monza curse. I heard a rumor, and I don't know if it's founded. I just read it, like, one place, and I saw it nowhere else, but that in the last 2 laps of the race, that excuse me, Checo was gaining on Max 3 seconds per lap, and that Max's car was having internal issues. And if Sonoda hadn't a DNF'd during the formation lap and they had 2 more laps, that Checo would have won the race and the Monza curse would have lived on.
Interesting. So Yuki was some sort of sacrificial lamb to break the curse.
And, like, you can't know that. It's the very beginning of the race. You can't know that Max is gonna start seeing struggles. But it was confusing to me, and it's funny because I noticed it was confusing to me that Oscar finished the race with the fastest lap. I'm like, Max is always gunning for that fastest lap point in the last couple of laps.
I'm surprised it isn't a bigger story because people pay attention to those numbers. The people, if he had some huge drop off in lap time, like that would have been what people were talking about by at least by today at least. So I
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's just like a rumor page or, conspiracy, but I'm like, but if it's true, that's nuts.
so this is our first race with Max not leading for the first 15 laps.
Yes.
He's gotten in front far quicker
Mhm.
in every other race if he wasn't starting in front.
Mhm. And I
Uh,
think we all expected him to like get Carlos turn 1. So shout out to Carlos on
mm,
his truly incredible defending. I mean, because let's be real, the Red Bull car is just head and shoulders above. And so for Carlos to have led this, second most or like the most laps not by a Red Bull
mhm.
all season, I love that for him.
Yeah, turn one was interesting. I noticed it was the one place where it's the tightest turn one. It's the one I always expect there to be a pile up, and I'm shocked when there isn't.
Mhm.
And it makes the Verstappen Hamilton pancake thing from a while back all that much more confusing because it's like no one should go in there together unless you're
Mhm.
absolutely sure. And that's how everybody who took the inside line could just break a little late and shut the door, go all the way to the other side of the past the apex to the other left side of the turn and block them off every time.
Mhm.
And I it it just became this like who's gonna little game of chicken at turn one every time. I did love Perez's first time he did the shoehorn where he had to get past Russell. So he
Yes.
went, I'm going to go all the way to the right. I'm going to get into the pit exit lane and take the inside. And it was so out there and deliberate. It was just letting George know, I'm taking the inside line no matter what. Move over.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you weren't going to win turn one unless you had the inside line. And he just had to crowbar his way in. And I was like, that was awesome.
That was aggressive.
Mm.
No, truly, turn 1 seemed to kind of be the paramount spot of overtakes, I noticed on Sunday. And I have to commend the FIA and whoever was, in charge of making a lot of the calls on this race because there was a lot of talking back and forth of, "Oh, he pushed me off. Oh, you know, he pushed me wide, or I didn't have a choice, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, did he though?
Right.
And I felt like they were making the right calls. Speaking of making calls, how do we feel about the Lewis Hamilton Oscar Piastri incident?
Absolutely fair. And when I say fair, I mean the outcome. Like I think
Right.
that
You think it was so you do think he should have gotten the penalty?
I what I was saying before we went live was is a possible interpretation of a certain rule in certain situations. In this particular case, Hamilton thought he was further ahead and moved over early, and he shouldn't have. And at 200 miles an hour, mistakes can happen, and it did.
Mhm.
And he apologized for it, which
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
magnanimous. And I think 5 seconds makes is while okay. So the gravel trap has the esports club, and I so commonly hear the phrase "you ruined my race."
Mhm.
I really don't like that phrase because
Interesting.
you're out there in a race car, contact could happen.
Mhm.
Um, it it's like how somebody either chooses to like in spite not get out of the way sometimes. Like
Yes.
you're walking down a sidewalk and you see somebody kind of coming at you and they're gonna bump into you, but you stay there just so you can they can bump into you and you be like, hey man, you should move. No, you should move. It I'm not saying Oscar did this. I'm saying there's situations where people don't get out of the way because they think they have the right to that space, and they absolutely probably do have right to that space. But if you see something barreling at you,
Mhm.
right, wrong, or indifferent, and you want to stay in this race, get your car out of the way, and then let the rules deal with it later. Um, but there's so many times I've seen people not get out of the way because they feel like they have the right to that space, and then get
Mhm.
mad and say you ruined my race. I'm like, you saw danger coming and decided to stay there out of principle, not out of
Mhm.
preservation of your car. And again, I'm not saying that's what Oscar did, um, but
I don't think is what Oscar did because
no, it's not.
he gave him so much space, and then he
Yes,
kept asking for more, and it's like, "Bro, you have so much space."
right. And if he had had more time to see that this was about to happen, he could have just tapped the brakes a little earlier and let saved his car some damage, and maybe appealed to had somebody appeal to the stewards. I don't know if that would have been possible, but regardless, it's just protecting your car and staying in the race is the paramount thing. So when I hear people say you ruined my race, it's like you probably had an opportunity to save your own race and get the other person punished, maybe. Uh, so that's why I have a particular disdain for that phrase. But in
Mhm.
this particular case, yeah, I don't. That was everyone's second bite at the apple. If you missed the turn one opportunity to take that inside line or get that overtake done, I think everyone felt like that next chicane was where you could make it happen. They're really,
Mhm.
I think those are the only two hard braking zones.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think people get angsty by that chicane and they're
Well,
willing to take
and
more risk.
right, and time was running down,
Hmm.
and you didn't and that because I think that was really what hurt the most, was that the race was coming to an end soon, and so they were all, making big moves, and Oscar was giving the space, and Lewis made a mistake, and he owned the mistake and
Hmm.
apologized after. But what's hard is that that mistake cost Oscar his race, and it's unfortunate, and it's the timing of it because he had to fall, 6 or 7 positions because he had to pit because he had damage, and then he didn't get to finish in the points. And so it's heartbreaking to see only because then Lewis did have enough time to outpace his penalty where it didn't matter. Um, but that's happened so many times in
Hmm.
racing that it's gonna happen to everybody at some point, and I don't really know that there's an answer that makes it right or, like, brings justice because it was an accident, it was a mistake. Did it Did Oscar come out the major loser even though he didn't really do anything wrong?
Yeah.
Yes. But also,
It
it's
it
happened to Lewis before, it's happened to Carlos before, it's happened to Charles way too many times. Like, it's happened to Esteban, like, it's happened to so many people that, it's just part of it, and
I agree. It happens a lot. Max Hiller says Russell at turn one was interesting. I think he's referring to the he pushed me wide. Wasn't that
it's
was
either that he pushed me wide or when they tried to radio him and he was like, "Do you see what's going on right now? I have a Red Bull."
up my ass? I believe is that what he said?
Yes.
They had to bleep it. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, the turn wide or the push wide thing was he wasn't pushed.
Typical George radio, if you will. That's how I kind of feel about it. Like, that's what George is like. He likes to I think that sometimes George it happens so fast, right? They're going so fast, it happens so fast. He wants to get in there and say, "Oh, he pushed me wide." Be like, "Hopefully." You know? And then they look at it and see, "Oh, yeah, he did get pushed wide." Or in this case, no, but
Oh,
good try," you know?
that's classic. Hopefully.
So,
Yeah,
hopefully.
they should have a little screen in their visor that shows them replays and be like, "Yeah, submit that one."
Yes, yes.
Uh,
So, I noticed, like, I don't really feel like I noticed it as much when he was at Williams, but I did notice it when he went to Mercedes that he would do that, and to the point where earlier when he was first starting out with Mercedes, like, I think at one time Toto had to get on the radio and be like, "Relax, just race, just keep going."
he's like a first year paralegal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know the
So
rules.
yeah, so I think it was another one of those little moments on the, he pushed me wide.
I I noted here that Albon sneakily hit super early,
Mhm.
and I didn't notice until maybe a lap or two later. That kind of paid off for him.
The undercut is super powerful in Monza, and it was a big talking point. I remember when Carlos was leading and you had Carlos Max Charles and you knew Carlos's tires were dying fast. And there were these big questions of are they going to pit Charles? Are they going to pit Carlos? And for Williams, it was obvious because Alex was their front runner. He was so much further ahead. But I was really curious to see how they were gonna manage it at Ferrari because technically you would wanna give the advantage to your guy in front. But the problem in my mind with that is Max Verstappen is in a rocket ship. So he's just gonna and tire degradation doesn't exist in the Red Bull. And so he's just gonna jet ahead and get as much of a gap as possible to where he negates the undercut. So I actually felt like Ferrari handled it well. They did the best that they could. If I was gonna like put in my opinion, I would have liked to see Charles make life a little bit more difficult for Sergio when possible. But I mean, everybody was protecting their own race. So,
We have a new viewer in the chat here, Weber's Racing.
hey,
Says finally caught a live podcast. Yes, we are doing it a little early today, so we're glad we were able to catch you.
welcome.
Welcome. And Mose Jag.
What's up?
Mose Jag says on Checo gaining on Max at the end. Apparently, Red Bull were worried about Max's car overheating, so they wanted him to build a bigger gap to Gasly to get into cleaner air. So that sounds like they wanted Max to go faster, but what you're really saying is that Max was slowing down to let Gasly get away and get out
Okay.
of Gasly's dirty air. But if
Okay.
it was Gasly, it would have been a back marker, and Gasly would have had to get out of the way anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I have not done any research into that particular thing, but I had the thought, I was like, have Red Bull changed Max's power unit at all this season? I don't even know if they have. So I'm like, I mean, it would be a good time. Okay, before we run out of time though, one thing that I feel like we should talk about
mhm.
is that Daniel Ricciardo will not be coming back for
They're saying
Singapore.
they're saying by Qatar or Japan, I believe.
Yes, I think that's like it's like hopefully, like
Yeah.
another one of those. So I personally am loving what Liam Lawson is doing in the car and the way he's been able to just jump in and take on some 2 really, really hard circuits from the jump in a new car that is also the last in the Constructors' Championship right now. So, I actually have felt like he's been really strong.
He's doing pretty good. We were actually in on Instagram. We have a reel talking about this bizarre kismet set of circumstances where Nick DeVries could be called back in the event Liam Lawson has to go to Japan to defend or to challenge for the Super Formula Championship, which he is in second place for, and less
Mhm,
than 10 points off the lead.
mhm.
And
In the event that Daniel can't race in Mexico.
right, so Daniel's not healed by Mexico. Liam Lawson has to leave for Japan. They can only have four drivers have driven for them this year. They have to make that awkward phone call to DeVries. Somebody in the comments on Instagram was saying that they're staying in an F1 car in where AlphaTauri is preferable for Liam Lawson than be able to get a Super Formula title.
I mean, I would if I were Liam, I'd rather stay in the F1 car, but you also have to ask yourself, what is he contracted to?
Mhm.
And so, in the end, that's kind of what's gonna make a lot of the decisions for him, um, and what he is legally obligated to go into, and also, I think especially in the Red Bull system, the choice is not really always yours. So they're gonna tell him what they want him to do versus Daniel versus Nick in this super hypothetical situation.
Mhm.
So there are plenty of people that will make this decision. It wouldn't be just Liam, but I think if Liam could make the decision, he would probably choose to stay in the F1 car.
See, I mean, I have no idea, but looking at there's only 20 F1 seats. And there's so many drivers that have come to F1, done it for a year or two, and moved on to other parts of their career. You've got uh, uh, Giovinazzi
Mhm.
racing in 24-hour Le Mans and all that fun stuff. You have this racing career outside of F1 or beyond F1 or after. Why wouldn't you want the chance to say that you have a title, a world title, or a whatever title, like you're champion of this series? If you're 10 points off,
Mhm.
you have a legitimate shot of walking away with a title, and therefore maybe even bolstering your F1 career even more, um, or helping your career after F1 if you only do that for a little while. It just seems kind of like a missed opportunity to pass up on. I'm just not going to get that championship title.
I mean, it depends on what their dream is. If their
True.
dream is to drive an F1, then they're going to stay in the F1 car. If their dream is to hold a world title in something, then they're going to go do that. But that's assuming they're the only one that gets to make the decision.
Uh,
I mean, I don't think that it's solely in the hands of a 20-something-year-old to decide
Fair point.
on behalf of the team. So,
Not race related at all, but Monza
amazing.
related.
Okay.
I was really impressed with the fans who had these huge Ferrari flags that
Mhm.
spanned an entire grandstand. Or
Mhm.
um, it was on track afterwards that I really noticed it, where I'm like, that's pretty coordinated for what has to be upwards of 100 people to be like, okay, we're all going to hold this and we're going to pull in the opposite direction. And they're walking down the pit straight with this massive 50-foot
Mhm.
flag. That's pretty good coordination. I mean, there's high school
Yeah.
marching uh, band teams or
And
whatever that have to like
for the
figure out.
Europeans that might not have high school marching bands, it looks somewhat similar minus the crowds
Mhm.
on a field in the middle of the game where a bunch of band members and various people will go on and make, basically coordinated choreography music. But I mean, I know it's a tradition. I know that it's a tradition at Monza with the Italian fans with these flags. So I think it's a beautiful tradition. I have thought before because a lot of times they'll lift them above the people's heads
Mhm.
and stretch them above the people. I have thought so many times, I would be so mad if I was one of those people underneath that flag and I ran myself down there because I wanted to see the podium celebration and I saw yellow.
That was they were saying that in the Gravel Trap chat room,
Mhm.
the social club chat room. They were being like, I would be so mad because half the grandstand is covered, and unless it's really perforated and you can see through it, like those
I
glasses
don't think so.
are.
Yeah, I doubt it. I mean, I haven't seen it myself, but I doubt it.
um, Weber's Racing says normally teams put in a new power unit for Spa, but unless they're going over the allocations of PU, it's not reported.
Mm.
Oh, okay. So they usually don't report that they put in a new power unit
Yeah, yeah,
unless
unless it's gonna result in a grid penalty. That makes sense.
there has to. I mean, F1 is huge. There has to be a fan out there that's put together some kind of component tracker where you can see, like, you can
Hasn't
scroll.
our co-host been doing that?
I can edit this out for the recorded version.
I do
Fast
believe
cars,
Christina does
fast.
it, but if it's not Christina, I do know that Formula News Live on Instagram is keeping a running, deck of it as well.
Okay. I'm on our website now. I don't know where I would find it.
I don't know that she has put it on her website, but I do remember at the beginning of the season, she was like, "Is this something that you guys would like for me to keep track of?" And we said, "Yes." So,
Mo's Jag says can always go to the FIA document site. That's what Christina does because she like
that's what she does in her spare free time.
she wakes up and reads the FIA
Mhm.
website.
We
What
love
I'm
her.
talking about is a more fun graphical interface that kind of shows you. Just like the video game. The video game will show you your power unit allocations, all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
anyway,
All right, in our last 2 minutes, any final questions?
Max Hiller says, as someone who did marching band in high school and college, that was spot on. Good
Oh,
job.
thank you. Not a lot of people know this, but I was actually a music major in college. So I know a thing or two about the music systems. And I have a lot of respect for marching bands, I will say. It's hard enough to sit in a chair and play those instruments, let
Hmm.
alone run around, stay in formation, keep your eyes on everyone else and on your major and on everything. So mad respect. And you got girls throwing sticks in the air and doing flips. I mean, like you might get whacked. It's chaos. It's a sport, if you will.
So, in terms of a good race, where does Monza sit with you on this year so far? Is it up
Mm,
near the top five?
good question. I would say Monza sits towards the top for me only because it's the best challenge we've seen to Max so far from outside of the team, like from outside of Red Bull. So I feel like it's been the most hopeful race
Hmm.
of the year. I also feel like it was a very safe race in the sense that nobody was in danger. You didn't see anybody slamming into walls or, cars on top of each other, which was lovely to see. And then I felt like there was some really just it was kind of a textbook what you want to see in a race, start to finish. I mean, you had the funny radios, you had the good overtakes, you had mistakes that resulted in apologies, you had penalties, you had DNFs, but nobody was in grave danger.
Hmm.
You still had the same winner, but you saw a new member of the podcast in Max's podcast in the cool down room, which was great.
I really want them to like at some point this year. Maybe it's going to be in one of the U.S. races. Someone actually puts the Dappin podcast sign up in the
I
cool
love
down
it.
room.
I love it so much.
Weber's Racing asks, when are you coming to Silverstone for the British GP?
Ooh, I almost went this year and then the flights were $5,000. So that was kind of what ended it for it. But I would love to go next year, honestly, as soon as possible. That's it's super on my bucket list to go to Silverstone. So we'll see. I'll get there someday.
Um, Big announcement. I don't know if we've said it publicly, but Gravel Trap F1 will be at Coda
Woohoo! All three of us in the same place at the
same
same
time.
time.
We got to do the Spider-Man meme. Three
Yeah.
Spider-Mans pointing at each other.
That would be so great.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us early in the morning to recap and
All of our
react
Americans.
to Monza. Uh, this will be up on. If you missed any of it, this will be up on podcasts within 24 hours, and then Wednesday we'll have our regular episode dropping then.
We look forward to seeing you guys then. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.